Well, good afternoon and welcome to this RTS London online event where we look behind the scenes of National Geographic's Shark Attack 360. This series uses virtual production to bring the presenter up close to virtual sharks as she explores their predatory characteristics. The complex software behind massive online games like Fortnite is Unreal Engine, and it is transforming the film industry and now the television landscape as it blurs the lines between reality and CGI in real time as the production is actually filmed. We have an amazing panel, so let me first introduce them. Firstly, our presenter, Dr. Diva Amon. Whereabouts are you, Diva?
Hi, Terry. Lovely to be here. I'm actually in Jamaica at the moment, so much warmer than I imagine where it is you are.
And you are a marine biologist, aren't you? Which is why you're so qualified for this. Next, can I? Sorry, Diva. Next, can I introduce Drew Jones, executive producer for National Geographic? Yes. Whereabouts are you, Drew?
Yes. Hi, Terry. Thanks so much for allowing me to be here. I am in Maryland, close to Annapolis, outside of DC, where National Geographic is headquartered.
Excellent. Thank you. So we've got people from around the world. Nick, executive producer, Arrow Media, where are you?
I'm in exotic Sussex, England, by the coast, but much less, not as warm as Jamaica.
By the seaside. Simon Percy, Managing Director of Little Shadow. And whereabouts are you?
Hi there, Terry. Thanks for having us. I'm in London, in Farringdon, or in our main office.
And Lucas Zatolski. And you are in an edit suite, yes?
Oh, muted.
Yes, you're the lead VFX artist with Little Shadow, yes. Thank you. So let's start with the story then at the commissioning end with National Geographic. Drew, how did you get to know the show?
Well, this is the second iteration of the show, but the reason this is such a great pairing for us is, National Geographic Society's mission is to spark curiosity, empower exploration, and inspire change. And in my humble opinion, it's rare to find people who aren't curious about sharks. And they've been on the planet for 400 million years. And with cutting edge technology, as we'll see, this series brings its viewers closer to sharks with scientific lens than ever before. And so each episode is a classic storytelling case, not necessarily of who done it, but why done it. And our show starts with one personal account of a shark incident to grab viewers' attention, and then through real-world experiments with a diverse cast of shark experts, stunning visual effects, as we'll see in our 360 lab with our lead investigator and the one and only Dr. Diva Amon, and even more personal accounts that have curious connections to our first story. The viewers follow the investigation and are given a strong indication in the end of why done it. So why this is an ideal show for National Geographic is the ultimate goal is to share insights on how sharks operate, what drives them, and give viewers, what they can take away as they jump into the big blue. And actually, one of the funny, or not funny, but interesting things about this is that a lot of the people who we follow and we hear about, the majority of them, they don't blame the shark. They recognize that it's an animal and it's curious. And hopefully this show demystifies sharks a bit so people understand the important role they play in our ocean's ecosystem. And the amazing visual effects in our new lab location for this season allows the exploration of the biology and the habitats of sharks to a wide audience who may never have actually had the opportunity to see it for themselves. So we're bringing a scientific view to sharks to the world. They're not villains, they're just misunderstood.
So shall we set the scene then with an excerpt from the show? Here is a clip.
We're really lucky that we live in a place where you can actually use the river and swim in it.
It was a great morning. We started earlier than we usually do.
Richard and I had been swimming in the river together for years. We'd do all winter, all summer.
We were in the water for about 20 minutes before we stopped.
I was treading water, and then all of a sudden, I felt a huge impact. It came from under and behind me. It was like a freight train hitting me. I just instantly knew what it was.
For decades, people have been taught to fear sharks. On TV, in movies. As a marine biologist, I know that bites are often the result of rare, unfortunate mistakes.
Our 360 team discovers the truth behind shark attacks, debunking the myths that fuel our fears, and reveal insights that can prevent harm to both people and sharks.
Quite a lot of excellent reenactment there, but you realised there was an opportunity for something extra, didn't you, Drew?
Yeah, so I mean, it kind of has the classic motif of storytelling where, you know, we have those personal accounts so people can actually emote and you can feel their connection to the story. But yeah, I mean, as we'll see, the fact that there is this technology out there that can bring us closer to the sharks and be able to examine them and learn about them in a whole new way, it's amazing to see, and we were excited to be able to do that with our partners here.
Well, thank you very much. Shall we move on to the production house then, which is Arrow Media?
Hi.
And Nick Metcalf.
Hi, we were overjoyed when, as Drew said, this was a second series. So we were overjoyed when National Geographic came back to us and said, we'd like to make a second series. Not least of all because we thought we could do better. We thought the proposition was strong, an investigation into why a shark has bitten somebody. And there were key elements, which Drew's talked about, including setting up the story, which was the original proposition, giving us a story to investigate. But a key element of the investigation was what we called our Shark Lab, a virtual space where the host, Diva, got to get up close to sharks and analyze the various characteristics that made them the likely suspect in the story we were investigating. And the things we wanted above all from the Shark Lab were that it should be dynamic, credible, and immersive. Diva we wanted seamless storytelling. And I think there's a clip which you'll be showing in a moment, which I think embodies this. We wanted to get into the studio, the lab, in a way that just made for natural storytelling. We wanted the lab to be dynamic, plenty of movement between the sharks and Diva, and to be able to tell a thrilling story about these amazing creatures. And seeing a virtual shark, a life-size virtual shark, is still, to me, stunning. You just get an extraordinary idea of the size and power of these creatures. And it's just, I think it makes for amazing television. And perhaps best of all, no sharks were harmed in any of the interactions.
Shall we see that excerpt then, as you've been talking about how exciting it is to see these sharks in real life effect, because the effects are very real, aren't they?
This colossal shark took Ben and Nick completely by surprise. Before we figure out why, it's important to solve how this apex predator can attack with such stealth.
I'm a marine biologist, and while I've been obsessed with sharks since I was little, I'm certainly no expert. But I do know they share a feature with a lot of other marine animals that can help to explain how Nick and Ben entirely missed the shark swimming below them.
Sharks spend a lot of time in the open ocean, where you'd think there aren't many places to hide or camouflage themselves.
But that isn't strictly true. In fact, they're able to hide in plain sight using light and the depths of the ocean. So if we look at this shark circling us now, you can see that it's clearly two very different colors. It's got a much darker top than the bottom. And this is something we call counter shading. And so if we look at the shark above us now, its white underbelly blends in really well against that bright ocean surface. So now let's get above the shark so we can see the opposite effect. Okay, now we're above. And look, you can just see how different it looks. It's much harder to see the shark with its dark shading against the deep ocean or the seafloor.
Oh, thank you. You can see there that that location plays a big part as well, doesn't it? Because a fantastic location. What was it?
It's Collins Music Hall in Islington in North London. It's a fabulous location, yeah. That was going to, when we set out to do this, we didn't know we were going to be shooting there. We had to hunt for a location. We wanted a location that gave us plenty of space, but an interesting physical space so that Diva and the sharks could interact with the space, so to speak. So Diva could move from one level to another, which made it really important in that particular clip, because Diva needs to be beneath the sharks and above them to make the point about the counter shading. But let me just backtrack for a moment. I mean, when we set out to make this series, we had what we thought was a strong creative proposition. Investigate a shark bite, a shark encounter, and then use the lab to go through the clues which you extract from each encounter to arrive at which kind of shark might have done it and why. Why was there this encounter? And the VFX lab was really important. And we just knew after the first season, we could do much more with it. We had the ambition and the vision, but we needed a creative partnership with our partners at Little Shadow to enable that vision. And we knew very early on that Little Shadow were going to be the right people to do this because they were bringing ideas to us. And we were just blown away by the ideas they were offering to us about how they would execute, how they would realize the vision we had. I mean, because no make no doubt about it, we knew the kind of finished vision that we wanted, but we didn't know necessarily how to get there, what the software was that was going to enable it, the technology, and so on. And they brought that to us. And I'm very happy to say it was a very creative, collaborative partnership because we knew, as I say, we knew stuff, but they knew how to do stuff. And that was really important to making this happen. And just to go back to that clip, what I loved about it is it starts with the shark's fin above the sea, a classic shot of a shark's fin, and then seamlessly takes you down, because you don't think you are in the studio. It takes you seamlessly into the studio. It's just that kind of dynamic, natural storytelling, really simple, but very effective, that I think was very powerful. And then you go into the studio sequence, as it were, you're in the studio, you've got a Diva plus huge virtual life-size sharks. And you've got Diva using the space to get above, below, to make the crucial points about counter shading. So I thought that was a very effective clip, an effective use of the space. So very happy with that.
So shall we move on to you, Diva? I mean, this must have been exceptionally unusual for you. Can you, first of all, I mean, actually give us a bit of context. You are well qualified for this, are you not?
Yes, so I'm a marine biologist. I have a doctorate, yes. And I spend all of my time essentially trying to unravel questions about the ocean, the life within it, and then communicate that with as many people as possible, whether decision makers at the United Nations so that we can better manage our ocean, our activities there, or with the public to try to build that awareness. You're exactly right. I mean, I had dabbled in TV before with National Geographic and a few others, but this was really something that I could not have envisioned. This, as I said, I'm a marine biologist, I am not an actor. And this really required me to get all of my very poor acting skills together. to sort of imagine, as you heard from Nick and Drew, the size of the space, which was empty at the end of the day, right? It was, sure, the crew was there, and thank God for their vision and patience, but there weren't any sharks. And we had to envision these giant sharks. And thankfully, you know, there was this technology that was able to help me do that. We had a mirror screen opposite where I could see the placement and kind of get the feel, but ultimately they weren't there. And so it took a lot of imagination, a lot of memory. And really, I mean, it was such a one-of-a-kind experience. I remember when I saw the first iteration of this series before I decided to sign on, and I just was so blown away by the VFX that was back then. That's not even anything compared to what it is in this series. And just being able to have, as a marine biologist, being able to have that access to these sharks, to see the scale of them, right next to me, to be able to see, to open their mouths and look at the shape of their teeth as we're working through the clues in these mysteries, to be able to even go inside of them and look at, you know, shark fetuses developing in their uterus. Like, it just really was like the CSI of shark shows. And as for someone who, as I said in that clip you saw, who as a little girl, I was obsessed with sharks. And so this was really just such a wonderful opportunity to be able to actually get in the water with real sharks, as we did for the series, but also to be in this incredible space with these virtual sharks and exploring sharks in a way that never has been done before.
So although there was nothing there next to you in this wonderful location, this music hall, Derek music hall, you were able, let's make this very clear, you were able to see what was happening because you had a big monitor and you could see the shark next to you, and you could see how far you could go to come up to the shark without actually walking into the middle of the shark, as it were, yes?
Exactly. There was a lot of time before we actually shot each shot, spending time on placement. So we would use the mirror screen to essentially envision where the shark would be swimming in, where, for instance, the surfboard that was missing the chunk was going to be, etc. And that allowed myself and the team to place me properly, to talk through the different beats of the shot that we were going to be filming, so that, as you say, Terry, I wouldn't be like walking through the shark essentially as we were filming. But it definitely still, I mean, you couldn't necessarily rely on the screen when you were filming itself. So it still did need some element of memory, certainly, because I had to be looking at the camera rather than the screen.
Of course, memory, yes, and acting. I mean,
and acting.
Absolutely. They were very lucky to get someone such as you. Now, we will come back to you, but I want to go on to the company that delivered all of this. Simon Percy, Managing Director here of Little Shadow. Let's start with that location, which we have featured so far. How did you make that work?
It was very early on that we had decided that we were going to need a digital twin of the location. And so we set about very early on, once we found the place, getting a LiDAR scan, which is essentially a way in which we're able to capture the real space and make a virtual version of it, a one-to-one replica, which is going to be really, really important for us for several reasons. Primary reason was in the way in which we were able to plan out all of the sequences. We were able to sit down with the director, with the DOP, and with the gaffer, and figure out exactly how we were going to use the space. Now, as we've already talked about, it's a huge, like, brutalist space in 3 floors, an amazing space, and we wanted to make sure we could use all of it. So we were able to move the camera around each of the different levels and plan that out in intricate detail with the director, working on the lenses, making sure the shark's movement through the space was all planned out. And we were capturing all of this. All of the previs was being captured and saved, ready for use later on when we got into onto set. So planning was incredibly critical for us right from the get-go to enable us to imagine everything, the gauntlet that had been laid down to us by Nick and the team. And so very, very early on, it became very clear to Lucas and I that we were able to really start playing around with the camera moves. Now, it's a multi-story space. To get a whole camera rig in there to be able to move between the floors was going to become impractical. So immediately, having a LiDAR, this LiDAR scan, this one-to-one digital twin of the space was critical, because we were going to have to go from the top floor all the way down to the bottom floor where the camera was, and then join up the two moves seamlessly. And so we were able to plan that well ahead of time, so that on set, all of the things that needed to be in place, the cameras needed to be where they were, all could be set up very, very quickly. So that then we had the previs, it was on the monitor, we could then tweak things to taste. There were always, you know, little moments that just needed to be tweaked. And I think as we progressed through the shoot, it became very clear that the crew were becoming a little bit more comfortable with the technology. And so certainly by the end of it, I think we were pushing the boundaries of even the previs that we had generated, which was already pretty elaborate. Cameras were being moved from hand to hand and all over the place, running on tracks. And yeah, it was you know, a big tip of the hat to Diva for keeping up with trying to move where all the sharks and everything was going to be. But yeah, fantastic the way that I think the technology worked.
Is it worth now having a look at that LiDAR? LiDAR
Yeah,
is
sure.
like radar. It stands for something, light detection and
Detection,
ranging. And actually, I believe people have even LiDAR ability. You can have it on your iPhone, can't you?
Right on your telephone.
Other phones are available, obviously.
Yes, of course.
So shall we just have a look at an excerpt that explains how that is all mapped? The digital twin is mapped onto the reality. Now, as you can see, there are the lines of the digital capture.
So yeah, so you can see it's fairly accurate. I mean, that's our digital model overlaid directly onto the photography that was shot. So it's an incredibly accurate process. So we make sure we leveraged every single nuance of the set within the scenes we created.
Yeah. And oh, there they come again.
So this is one of the other things that that we'll lead on to when Lucas is going to chat, was the fact that we were camera tracking. So all of the camera's telemetry, the motion, its angle, its rotation, was all being captured and then fed into the Unreal Engine where we had our previs. So the previs was all set up beforehand, but then the real camera was then reacting and then finding our real sharks, and they were moving around in real time. Which was again something that we wanted to make sure was happening. One, primarily so that Diva had something to look at, but secondly, and slightly more importantly, we were able to record this information, this kind of composite of the live action and the CGI at the same time. And we were running an edit on set at the same time. So after the cameras had finished turning over, the composites were given to the editor, and we were getting really, really quick live feedback of the sequences to make sure that we hadn't missed anything.
So you were actually editing perhaps on location, were you? Or...
Absolutely, yeah. This was again one of the doctrines that was set early on, is that we needed to find efficiencies. And so obviously it's very costly that when you have to do pickups, we wanted to try and make sure that we had all the information we needed on the day. So doing the edits as running concurrently was a really big thing.
I mean, I just watching that shot of them swim right across the front of Diva is just magic. And into the water, look at the light playing there from above the water. That's just wonderful. We're going to have to now, perhaps, shall I move on to Lucas and ask a little bit about all of those sharks? Because they're anatomically correct, aren't they? They're beautiful. And you are the shark wrangler, are you not?
Yes, that's what I was called on set. Making creatures and VFX, aliens is fine, you know, even dinosaurs, you have a lot of creative freedom. With things that exist today, you have to be very, very, very specific with an anatomy, with how they look, how they move. We worked with a team of specialists that the entire team pretty much learned more about sharks in 3-4 months than our entire lifetimes, on how they move, what their day-to-day is, how they reproduce, and some gory detail. So we had to build these. We set about creating these sharks. We've had some clever techniques where when we looked at sharks swimming, their gills are incredibly thin and they flap around like fabric. They move in a very fluid, beautiful way. They're very graceful creatures, very muscular as well, but they have some intensely powerful muscles. So everything moves and bends. They're not static plastic models. So that was one of the challenges we had to kind of get a little bit of that realism in there. Whereas previously, those kind of effects were reserved for Hollywood budgets. We've been able to make strides in recent years in adding a few of those little bits that were reserved for Hollywood into more TV friendly budgets to make them look a little bit more realistic in terms, well, as well as like lighting, how they would look. We had some very interesting creative meetings about whether they should be wet in the studio or they should be dry, which were I think we settled down on the dry and it looked great. Yeah, that was a fun little process. And then we had to create all the animations. We had some amazingly talented artists who worked on big budget productions for Netflix, for Amazon, for Disney, animating these sharks, and we created a library of movement. We were able to, have them swing forward, having them turn, having them bite. And once we had this entire library, we could then, for a necessary shot, blend between these motions naturally, so they could swim and then turn and then swim up, bite, which kind of gave us not only the flexibility but also the speed in which we could create these shots, and how quickly we turn the previs to the executives so they could make sure they're all happy. And then once we had all the cycles and everything, we basically pushed them into so just kind of going back a little bit, a lot of the stuff has to be done in pre-production for virtual production stuff, because we have to have these on set. They don't have to be the finished product, but they have to be good enough to be there and to kind of represent what we're going to have. And then we take that and finish it in post-production. So I've worked with the DOP and the director down in the basement, as the pit, as we call it. It was 3 floors of pure thick concrete, so no Wi-Fi, no telephone, nothing. It's basically like a bunker. Lovely location, but extremely echoey. So everyone had to, non-essential people had to be out 100 meters away, outside of the in where the editing was and sound. What we were able to do was we were able to create our own Wi-Fi network pretty much within the building. So I could sit there with the laptop with the director and a DOP and wrangle sharks. And they would say, can we move that shark lower? Maybe it's covering up Beaver's face. Can we have it swimming through that from that side? Yeah, we were able to do that in real time. And we were planning shots. What was really exciting to see was that for a crew that has never worked with this, and this is a testament to the crew and to Diva, who, in my opinion, was an amazing actress. She was really excellent, and natural. But basically, the crew was able to, within a very short amount of time, with almost a day, really get used to the technology and explore its limits. In a few days in, we were able to come up with some crazy camera moves, and the cameramen were handing off the camera off, and because we had a previs of where the shots were, where our coral display was, and where all the information was displayed on, they were able to do some crazy innovative things, and we don't like to say no usually. When the director DOP has an idea, we go, yes, let's do that. This is a really cool shot. How about we're in space, we're rotating, suddenly the camera pulls back and we see Diva and we see the globe in the studio. And we go, yeah, let's do it. Because everyone's really excited about the project. And it was pretty, it was a really great experience.
So shall we have a look at our second excerpt here, which is you putting the sharks into the set? Just
Yep. So we have a clean plate. We have the data we need from Unreal Engine, and then we're just compositing the sharks on top. We use Blender for the final renders because it's incredibly fast, especially for what we needed to achieve. We then give this ungraded to the grading studio, and we're going to put the final touches in color and stuff like that. But yeah, we're utilizing the tracking information, and because we have previs of everything, we know what it's supposed to look like. We know that what the sharks are supposed to be because it was already agreed upon. It was already shot, so that when in post, there's a lot less guesswork. We don't have to guess. We don't have to go back and forth between the production and ourselves. It just makes the process a lot more fluid and efficient. But because we had so much previs, all the previs that we did 2 weeks before we shot, almost 90% of the shots made it into the thing, which was pretty cool and quite unusual. It's really great.
I mean, that is so realistic, isn't it? That is amazing. It's
crazy how it shows you the scale, right? You don't imagine them being so big, but they are massive creatures. You wouldn't want to meet one in the. I mean, I've got a little one here, but not to scale.
Okay, hold on to it. We'll have a look at it in a minute when we come back from this. Just look at the light playing on that. I mean, that is just amazing. That is really good.
Yeah,
so show us your shark.
Oh, just a little.
Oh.
totally close. But we decided to augment the set with a little bit of caustics dancing around. We felt it was quite a nice little thing to embed, especially when we had a big kind of tank portal where we had the sharks coming through. It just added a little bit of extra little light play in where it needed to be.
So, had you yourself done much quite as tricky as this before? I mean, was this really stretching your abilities, or was it business as usual for you?
In terms of virtual production, it was pretty much very run of the mill. We've done this before. We've done immersive experiences. We've done Unreal Engine and tracking and virtual production before. What probably the biggest bit was getting the sharks right. And getting them good enough for the virtual production shoot, so that we had the right scale, at least we had the right colors. They weren't finished. Some of them didn't even have teeth. But yeah, I think it was the biggest challenge was getting the anatomy and everything basically finished and ready.
An impressive piece of work. Thank you. I'm going to go back to Diva now. Diva, okay, so we've seen all of this going on. It must have felt very strange. And were you always thinking, actually, I'm not quite sure whether that shark is exactly right? I mean, were you giving feedback into the team?
Well, so as we heard from Lucas, the sharks that were included on the mirror screen were not the final version. They were just like not very poor quality, but they were just lower quality sharks than, I mean, I think, Lucas, you just said some of them didn't even have teeth, for instance, right? And so I was able to just sort of put that aside and say, like, I trust in this team that they are going to look good at the end. And I think it was just, there were too many other things going on for that to be a concern. But I think, yes, it was challenging, but just tapping into what a few of the others have said, on set, there really just was this like feeling of like innovation and excitement because of that innovation. Sure, the first day we were all working out some bugs, getting used to this technology, getting used to each other. But beyond that, it really, like, we really just sort of trucked along filming. Things happened very seamlessly. And I think that's just because everyone was so excited about what was being produced and the fact that we were really pushing the limits.
And everybody in production could see what was being put together from Unreal Engine and from the actual cameras, and that must have been exceptionally exciting to see. So maybe at this stage I can talk to people and say, what were the issues? Come on, are we going to get a little bit of truth about behind the scenes now?
Let me start by saying the previous iteration, we didn't have previs, we didn't have the rudimentary version of the VFX played into onto a monitor and through the eyepiece of the cameras. We had yellow tennis balls on stands, and people had to imagine that this was going to stand in for a shark. So you had to imagine the scale and the movement and so on. And it was much more difficult to create fluid movements, to know, hang on, where are we going to move the camera? We've got to leave, we can't be too precise about it. We've got to leave room for the shark to move and so on and so forth. A lot of it was guesswork by comparison with what we had. And so that meant that you could devise much more natural, much more ambitious, dynamic movement, which was just a breath of fresh air. I think it's much harder for a host to interact with a tennis ball. And even if you bring Diva's natural vivacity to the studio, it just wouldn't have been the same thing. Diva was very modest about her acting skills. She brought a lot to the studio. The energy and life was brilliant. But I think that to have the ability to see where things were and for the cameras to move, sometimes in different ways, so Diva moves one way, camera moves a different way, to plan that kind of ambitious mise en scène was breathtaking.
And if I could just jump in too, just to give kudos to the whole team here as well. I mean, Lucas and Simon touched on it with the factual accuracy of the sharks themselves needing to be what they needed to be on our network. Kudos to them and the research team to be able to get that properly done. And then to Nick's point, he said earlier, the connectivity between scenes from going from, say, Diva out on the ocean swimming or diving with sand tiger sharks to going into this 3D space where we can examine it. All of those connection points were really well done. And, from where I was sitting and reviewing stuff, just made me happy sitting there. These guys had it well in hand.
Okay, I'm going to press you. There must have been one or two occasions where you went, oh my goodness. How are we going to get out of this? Come on.
I don't think there was never a moment where it's like, how are we going to get out? It was more of how can we accentuate or big up whatever point we're trying to make. So, that I think that's probably the only thing where it was just, and the size, like what we were saying, the size of these sharks in comparison, I think there was, one instance where I thought the shark would be bigger and I think it was, and they updated it in a heartbeat. So, I don't know, really it was a very smooth, from where Nick might have, or the DOPs and everything, but everything from where I sat was really, really well taken care of.
I do remember one funny thing where, because of the need, gosh, you guys correct me because I'm going to say this very wrong, but ultimately we're in this massive, dusty, not used music hall, and the floor had to be pitch black. Do you remember this, Nick and everyone? The floor had to be pitch black so that the editing could be as seamless as possible. But of course, everyone's walking through this dusty hall and the dust was white. And so we had to keep furiously cleaning the floor of the warehouse space, literally every few minutes, to make sure that that editing process was as seamless as possible later on. So there was some very well used mops basically on the side of the warehouse that were employed a lot.
That is so funny. Yes, because you don't want to see dusty footprints on the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, we had to clean up a fair few rogue ones in post, little racing here and there.
The caustic reflections, they covered a multitude of sins, right? So one of the reasons I happened to pop them in, but they added something as well.
I'm now coming back to the fact that you said that it was getting Hollywood effects, and we would expect that to be extremely expensive. What is it that has developed recently to make this get-atable for TV?
One of the things is that you've got to keep an eye on technology. It is running very rapidly at the moment, and we work really hard to to try and keep on top of the technology. You know, it is changing all the time. And I think that one of the big things for us is to find ways in which we are able to use tools to allow the artist more time to work. And I think one of the many things that we did within this project is just find pipelines that took away some of the underhood work that can typically take a lot of an artist's time, so that they don't have to spend the time doing that. And I think technology is a big thing to enable us to make some of those big efficiencies. I mean, obviously working in real time, you're not waiting. I mean, that's one of the big traditional things, right? In VFX pipelines, you're typically waiting for a while to see shots. Now, again, one of the things that we set up originally was that we don't want Nick and Drew to be waiting to see stuff that, you know, we were trying to rapidly prototype all the time. And so leveraging the real time aspect of both Unreal Engine and also Blender to be able to turn shots out very quickly. And again, not also having them in grayscale, which is again a typical part of the previous process. We were having them shaded and lit. So again, just trying to get to a point at which decisions could be made a lot more rapidly. And that makes a big difference, I think, from our perspective, to be able to turn things out more quickly.
That is a very important thing about technology, isn't it? That it is constantly changing, and trying to keep up to date with that is probably one of the top things for your company. And a nice point made up here by David Thomas. Wonderful technology, but the creativity on the production side, you know, on the commissioning side, etc., to get all of those effects that technology was allowing you to do is impressive as well. The creativity, I have to say, is magnificent. Drew, you must have been surprised perhaps at what they actually managed to deliver.
I will say I was excited because, to be fair, we had worked a little bit with Little Shadow the previous season, and some of the drips and drabs, literally, of blood in the water, were, I was stunned then. So when you know, we were talking about companies we were going to work with to, you know, ramp up for the next season, you know, Little Shadow came up, and just from those previous interactions, I had a feeling it was going to be just what it is: super fantastic graphics that, you know, really make you stop and stare and kind of think to yourself, how did they do this? So I won't say surprised, but excited. Yeah.
And you, of course, you mentioned, didn't you, Nick, that you had just a remarkable relationship with Little Shadow. And so Arrow Media and Little Shadow, that relationship was very tight and absolutely had to be, didn't it, to get the effects you wanted?
Absolutely. It's for me, it was a dream partnership. I didn't just want to have a shopping list and say, you go do this in exactly this way. Not least of all because I didn't know how we could get the best out of things. So what I wanted was them, Lucas and Simon, and the team, the brilliant artists they were working with, to bring ideas to us and say, actually, yeah, you can do this, but you could also do this, which might be better. And so it was a collaborative, creative partnership, which I think is wonderful. We're not the people who know everything. We want to do things, but we want to work with people, good people like Lucas and Simon, who know how to do things. And it was perfect, a perfect relationship for me.
Can I just ask a question? Quite often we have seen this sort of thing on other more expensive shows. Mandalorian had this amazing big screen behind it, didn't it? A digital effects screen. You were not using that, were you? Using green screen?
Yes. So we use green screen. The volumes are great, but there are many pitfalls to them. Not only because once you shoot it, you can't change it. We've had clients before who we've shot with and then decided we need to change the background, so we had to cut the people out, change the background, fix things on the stuff. The work for you know, certain situations, but for majority of the stuff, you can get away with green screen these days. That looks pretty much as if the background is there. It depends on the application. I think for this show, using an LED wall would probably not work that well as we're doing, because we're doing a reverse virtual production. We're putting CG objects in a real space. Whereas with a volume, you're putting a real person in a CG space. So yeah, that was the kind of the difference between using volume and the green screen.
I'm with you. We had a couple of comments or questions, didn't we? I don't know whether there's anything that we can see from our viewers that we might be able to comment on. I'm asking the producer here because I saw some of them. There you go. Did you see, as a composer for TV and film and also a sound designer, I did wonder whether you had to take advantage of, oh, it's gone, convolution reverb to create some of the soundtrack. Now, who can answer that one?
I can't, but I know people who can, but they're not here right now.
I mean, you were saying, Lucas, that there was difficulty with the sound.
There was a lot there was a lot of echo, there's a lot of bouncing of the lamp, and we did speak with the sound team. So they have used some tools, which are pretty. I think it was called Isotope. That does the reverb, the reverb, the removal of the sound bouncing around. Everyone had to be super quiet on set. You could hear a pin drop over there. I mean, we had sometimes someone just walking past on the third floor and you could really hear it, or a massive truck going across outside and you could hear it. We had to stop and wait for it to pass. Everyone to be quiet. But yeah, I think the sound guys did an amazing job with what they had to work with. It was a pretty tough environment to record in.
Yeah, I saw a couple of the remarks were talking about, and I've had experience of university students starting to use Unreal Engine as a way of envisioning and as a way of actually creating new and interesting types of films. Is it becoming, do you think, much more common to see this being used, or is it still a little bit esoteric? Are you finding more occasions of this being used at all?
I mean, certainly it's the tools are more readily available now, and you know, the information out there on the internet is incredible for the training, so people are able to get into you know, understanding and playing around. And that's the thing about real time, is that you can get incredibly quick feedback to your lighting, to your motion, you know, to the composition of your shots, and that makes a big difference. And even with what we do, so absolutely. And for us, it's really exciting because, you know, we're always looking at people's work, because it's, you know, there's amazing work out there, and you know, we never stop learning, and I think that's quite exciting about what we do as a profession. You know, there's always a challenge, there's always a new way. It's a new way of being somebody doing something that's been done a million times before, and they've just found a little tweak on it. But yeah, it's very exciting to see new talent using the software.
And I believe, and you were mentioning that if you go to the website, there are an awful lot of videos to help you learn to understand how to use it. So if anybody is watching and they want to find out a bit more, you just literally go to the Unreal Engine website, don't you? And you can have a scout around in there and find out even more than you perhaps have found out today. Do you think the quality of those is very useful?
They're superb. Epic are an amazing company. We've worked really closely with them for many years. They are so generous with their time, and you know, they love to see amazing things. You know, so kindred spirits in that respect, and they put good quality training material, and indeed huge amounts of, you know, data in terms of scenes and animations and props, etc., out for people to be able to use. You know, that's there for people who are starting out. They can jump on and they can be creating things very quickly. Yep. So I'd say 100%.
And just add on quickly, it's free for personal use. You get the entire suite. It's not some sort of baby version of it or cut down version. if you are passionate about making games or filmmaking or VFX, it's a download and millions of YouTube videos and learn. You can emulate cameras, real cameras that exist in the world, lenses, your dollies, your jibs, how you move the camera around. You can play with lighting that works in real time, so you can learn about lighting. There's so many disciplines you can, directing, lighting, editing, it all comes together.
We had a question about how you were tracking camera moves there, but perhaps we can elaborate on that a little, yes?
For sure. So we were using the old NCAN system, which is the new Zeiss Sim scenario, which is it's amazing. It's a technology that allows us to be inside or out. We're not tied like some camera tracking systems are, to being in one space. You set it up, you calibrate. Because we were using the system, which now belongs to Zeiss, we use Zeiss lenses, and Zeiss have a range of cinema lenses that are encoded. So all the information for the lens, the zoom, the distortion profiles are all fed directly into Unreal Engine. So it's an incredibly effective tool for doing camera tracking. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for us to use that system on this shoot.
Yes, because you're making the difference between the fact that some places have like locations with dots and lights in the ceiling that track the cameras, and you have to go there to get the effect that you want. Yes. Whereas you're saying, using this system, you can use it in a location of your choice. Yes, am I correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Inside or out, yeah, you're able to, once you've calibrated the space, you know where the floor is, you're able to go with straight off the bat. It takes very little time. If you've got encoded lenses, it's the lens profiling that can take the time to set up. And that's just so the distortion lenses, lenses have their own distortion factors. It's a big thing. You need to make sure that they are correctly mapped so that the digital version is seeing the same thing. And then, once that's established and the camera is set up and locked into Unreal, wherever you move your real camera, your virtual camera follows. And therefore, then anything else you have in your virtual scene is then moving at the same time.
Oh, thank you. Now, Drew, shall I come back to you with that question from that was posed about season 3, or would you rather say no comment?
In my mind, I love this show, and it'd be great to see as many as we possibly could. I am not in charge of any of that, so I will leave it to the higher ups to be able to comment on that or comment on that. But yeah, no, it's been such a great working relationship with everyone here. It's great to highlight talent like Diva and then obviously the VFX, the amazing work that they're doing there. Nick and team, also great partners. So, from my side, I do 100 more if I could, but it's not on me. So
let me come back the last word to Dr. Diva then. Do you think there is much more that we can find out about sharks that you, as a marine biologist, would like to say, no, I think we should be doing this and doing this still? There's much more.
I think I grew up watching shows like this 20 odd years ago. It was these kinds of like survivor shows which really featured on shark programming back then. But what we're seeing with this that National Geographic is doing as part of SharkFest and this Shark Attack 360 is really this sort of like new iteration that brings, what I love about it is it brings conservation and it brings science into the picture. So yes, you've got these incidents that are being discussed, you get the real aspect of talking to survivors, but then you also get this entirely new world of science fusing with it. And I think as a result of that, there is just so much more to do. There's so much we still don't know about sharks and their behavior. And there's so much that we do know that the story needs to be told. And this is really what National Geographic is doing and partners are doing with this kind of programming. So it's great.
There we heard from the expert. Now, let me just tell you, if you're watching and you have colleagues who might want to see this, it is going to be streamed straight after the event has finished. You will be able to see the whole thing streamed at any time at that same location. I have been asked to give a little plug for something that's coming up, which is that we've got I'm sorry, I've got to find it. We've got Norman Green did an episode called Televising the London 1984 Olympics. And if you just search on the RTS London YouTube channel, you will be able to find it. I mean, it is fascinating going back to 1948 and say, well, look at that camera. All a bit different, guys, from what we're seeing today. It is a fascinating story that Norman did for us a while ago for RTS London. So thank you very much, Norman, for that. So thank you now. I must say thank you to all of you for giving your time to talk to us today. I know the audience really appreciated it. We got lots of good comments coming through, and I look forward to finding out what happens next. But so from us here at RTS London, thank you very much and goodbye.